Hi, welcome to Jot Notes, a podcast where we dive into the world of books and authors. My name is Jenna Green. I'm a YA fantasy author known for the Reborn Mark series and the Imagine series. With me is Miranda O, a contemporary chick lit author of the Chin Up, Tits Out series. And she is the privilege and honor of introducing our guest for today. Hi, Miranda.
Hello, hello. And as always, I am super stoked to introduce our guest today, a fellow Canadian, a fellow Bridgian, whatever. Jen is going to correct me on that one right away. But Miss Danika Stone.
I think we have a term.
No. I don't know. We got Winnipeggers where we're from, but I don't know if that's something to be proud of with this winter. But anyways, let's get to our guest, Miss Danika Stone. She is an author, an artist, and an educator who discovered a passion for writing fiction while in the throes of her master's thesis. Now she is a self-declared bibliophile, and Danika now writes novels for both teens and adults. So we're going to dive into the differences of writing that. But anyways, her novels include Switchback and The Dark Divide. So welcome. We are so happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. And I have like a million more books as well. So like that's the one. The Dark Divide is the middle of a trilogy. So don't start with that one. Start with Edge of Wild. But yes, I have a bunch of young adult and a bunch of mysteries as well.
Now, okay, so I want to start where it started for you. I'm right now, I am a new mom. I'm going back to work. I am in school. I podcast, I write. So there's a lot going on, but you discovered your passion for writing when you were writing and completing your master's. Like, how did that come to pass? Like, I take on too much and I'll admit that, but how did you do that? Like, completing your master's is a huge undertaking.
Okay, so first of all, I'm just going to say I have 3 boys. I never wrote until the last one was out of diapers. So I don't know how any parent does it, because like I literally would like have to go like have a breather in the bathroom because like they were always on me. So I'll just put it out there. I wrote nothing while the boys were young. But what happened is I was really gung-ho. I was going to do this master's and I wanted to do the research, and I got to a point where I just found I couldn't go forward. Like I was actually so burned out. And I remember laying on my bed, just feeling like I was being sucked into the mattress. And I was at a breaking point. I had nothing left to give. And for the first time, probably since I'd had kids, I decided that I was just going to give myself time to have fun. And so what I did is I would just make myself do my research that I had to do. I was doing metadata analysis, which is just as boring as it sounds. And so what I would do is I do so much, and then I'd let myself watch TV and I'd write fanfic. And I'd never done it before, but it was like this complete release because it wasn't meant to be something I would share. So here I was writing this very professional book about student engagement, and here's all my research, and this is how I teach, and here's my practice. And then I was just like, oh, I hate that ending of that TV show. I'm just going to rewrite it. And what I found is that when I let my brain play, I all of a sudden had much more energy. So I had just burned the candle at both ends and there was nothing left. So for me, the big turning point was I just had to have fun. And the weird thing is, I think lots of us as writers forget it's supposed to be fun first. And if you can't make it fun, well, you should stop.
I can't agree with you more.
Yeah, they say the first draft you write for yourself. Yes. Like tell a story you want to read, tell a story that's fun. And then the second draft when you're editing, and that's really for the reader. Like, oh, they don't need to know this. They do need to know that, that's how it should be.
Yeah, exactly.
And I can't agree with you more. Writing when you have young ones at home, like I didn't even have the brain capacity. I remember preparing to go on mat leave, and I told my coworkers I'd be back in 6 months, but at the same time I was also going to write a book. And they're like, we love your ambition. But like, if it doesn't happen, don't be disappointed with yourself. And I was like, yeah, totally. That's fine. And my kid turns a year, a few days. And I think I've written about 10,000 words, and it's been on like the few hours a weekend where my kid is at her grandparents or at her uncle's place, and I've had 15 hours to myself before I can actually sit down and have the brain capacity to write. Just having all that attention on you all the time is wonderful, but it is mentally draining. And when you have nothing left to give, what you put on a piece of paper is just not not great, right? So
Exactly.
it gives me a little more validation that I'm not the only one that had a little bit of difficulty writing, especially in those first few months or first year or so. But when you love it, you do it because you love it and you're having fun. And that's really, at the end of the day, I think what a lot of us writers and creators, we sometimes forget, but we do live in that fun realm, is just writing those stories for ourselves. So what kind of stories do you like to tell? Like you've put out a lot in the world and with different audiences, which I want to dive a little bit deeper into first, but like what kind of stories? I like talking about real life stuff. Jenna likes to make up entire worlds. So we're both very different when it comes to having fun in the writing world. What kind of stories do you like to tell?
I really gravitate towards strong women. And I just find that there's so many ways that could play out. So I usually get my characters sort of appear in my head first, and I sort of can hear them, and then I have a sense of what the scenario is. But until I have the actual character developed, I don't really go very far with it. But I would say the consistent part for me for everything I do is that strong female character that I am interested in seeing how she gets out of this terrible situation that I throw her in. And that's not to say I don't also write with like male characters. And in fact, my Waterton series was originally one big book, but when my agent, when he signed me, he was like, great, I love it. This is way too big. Let's break it up into a trilogy. And I ended up choosing different viewpoints, basically stories for each one. And it ended up being Rich's story was Edge of Wild. So it was a male viewpoint. But yeah, that's what I think I kind of gravitate towards, are these great stories. How do these powerful women, and they can be flawed and fragile as well, but they have this drive to save themselves, this agency. That's what I love.
I love that, because I love writing about powerful women as well. In the past, it doesn't have to necessarily be a story like I tell. It could be something like Jenna tells, and it could be complete fantasy, but there's still those life lessons in there that take away, or that we want our readers to take away from it. So now my next question is around your audience. Like you write for adults, you write for teens. Is it challenging switching the writing to different age groups for you?
I wouldn't, okay. Is it challenging? No, it's not. But usually what happens is the story itself tells me what it's supposed to be. And when I was doing Word Bridge, and I can't remember which session it was, we were talking about it. And I mentioned that one of the most recent books I wrote, the one that it just went off to my agent, I wrote it thinking it was YA. And I got about 20,000 words in, and it was just turning very dark, and it felt more like my mysteries. And I thought, wow, like I have to go back and I need to change this, because there is a very different audience. And so I did. I had to rewrite those first 20,000 words. But once I did that, I kind of felt like I had this puzzle where everything sort of fit, and I liked the characters, but I felt like I was kind of up here and I needed them to get really dark. And as soon as I did it, like the whole puzzle clicked into place, and I couldn't write fast enough. So what I often think about is that if you are with the right characters and you're writing the right story, then you shouldn't have a question about what genre it is. The story itself tells you. And that is how it fits for me. I'm not sure if it does for everyone else.
I can resonate with that. Because, and I never really thought about it that way before. And I wrote my first series, Chin Up, Tits Out, and it was from perspective of myself. Like, it was a fiction story based on true events, and that's fine. But it was very much attached to who I am. Now, the second series that I'm working on right now is attached, but it's not from my perspective. It's from characters of women that I've interviewed, and I've kind of compiled and created fictional characters from real women. And like forcing that writing out was challenging, but then once all the puzzles pieces kind of fit into place, it was like pouring out of me, and it was impactful at that point. I never thought that it would be flowing that easy from a point of view that I had never written from before. So it's kind of like, okay, once you got your story idea and you get the flow going, once that faucet is open, it's open, and it's just going to go.
So I think for you, where at first it wasn't quite going, it's like wearing clothes that don't fit. Like you're never going to move smoothly if your clothes are binding everywhere. You need clothes that are your size and the right fit and build. And oh my gosh, like once you get those elements all lined up, you're just almost channeling. I love that you use the word flow. That was actually part of my my research for my thesis. And I think authors, if you can capture that moment where you just like everything is coming together, just don't stop, just go with it.
Yeah.
Where you forget you're writing.
Yeah.
When you look up and you're like, whoa, where did the time go? Did the sun set? Those are, it's not going to happen every day. It's not good. There are some days I sit down at my laptop and I type like one word, and then it takes an hour, and then I just go, okay, today it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. And I know other people set word count goals and things. For me, I'm just like, nope, I'm tired or I'm cranky or meh. And I just set it aside. And then we try and find that zone another day. And I mean, obviously my books are different than Miranda's, and they're not, I've never had magical powers, and I've never lived in a dystopian, well, I might be living in a dystopian world. I haven't lived in like this kind of dystopian world, but I've experienced loss. I've experienced strife. I've experienced fear. I've learned things about myself. So it doesn't matter if your story is horror or mystery or whatever. There are ways to put yourself into that character and think about it from their point of view. I've never been a boy either, but I've talked to them. I live with them, and hopefully I can figure out what they maybe might be thinking.
Yeah.
Maybe. I still haven't figured out my husband, so
yeah. I don't know how those membrane work sometimes. I just don't get it, but that's okay. You gotta love them.
So let's go back to your Waterton mystery series. I know at the beginning we listed 2 of your books, and that's just because we couldn't have a 45-minute intro listing them all. So you're right. We did list 2, and one's in the middle of the series, but I just like the title, so I made Miranda. But so
yeah, that was Jenna's fault.
I know.
Oh, very good.
Throwing her under the bus. I'm just kidding.
We both live in Lethbridge, and you set this series in Waterton, and I think that's really cool because I read a lot of books and it's set in Chicago or New York, and I've went to Chicago once, but I don't live there. And I remember Waterton's like an hour and a half drive. I know that place. I can picture it. So is that why you picked Waterton, or was there other reasons?
That's one of the reasons. Another reason is where my family is from. So if anybody follows me on social media, I'm constantly posting about renovating this 100-year-old cabin. My grandmother grew up there. So her parents came from Sweden, and that's where she grew up. And that cabin has passed through the family and is now in mine. And so we're doing a big renovation. So my dad literally grew up there. My cousins were the last kids who went through that school before it closed. Growing up there, we were there every weekend. We were there all summer and all holidays. And there's just a different feel to Waterton. Like, it's a place that you can very easily get where there's no one else, and you have no one who can hear you, who can help you. Your phone doesn't work. You just don't have access. And when writing a thriller series, I just felt like that is a very interesting place, because I've written other books that are also thrillers, but mostly you just pull out your phone if something bad happens and you try to get help. Well, you remove all of that with Waterton. It just is a different kind of place. So that was part of it. Part of it is also my reaction to Waterton. Like, I love it. I really, really do. And I love the people who are from Waterton. I have good friends that I've known my entire life, ranchers that live around the park. And I just want to kind of do an homage to that community. And the interesting thing is, like, there is this real sense of us and them. Like, I'm a townsperson, so like I am kind of naturally accepted. My family's been there forever. But new people are not always accepted. And I say that with the most loving sense. Like, I remember once my dad telling me that you weren't really from Waterton unless your family was there before 1940. And I was like, why 1940? Like, why is that the cutoff date? And he was like, well, because that's the families that are from there. And it just is the most ridiculous thing. But
the person moved there in 1941 is like, darn.
Too bad.
Didn't make the cutoff.
So I also really wanted to play with that. Like, what if you take this guy from New York who's there to make this hotel work, and he's just gonna like cut through the slack and get rid of things that are causing issues, and the whole town works against him. But then not only that, what if I throw in a serial killer? So at least one of them, so you have the whole town being in, causing issues, and one of them is willing to go all the way and actually like kill him if possible. Well, I love that idea. And Waterton, like, you can't get out of, there's one road in and out. Like, my great grandma, when she was there was like a really bad snowstorm. We were talking about 5-foot drifts, right?
Yeah.
Before we started. So my grandma ended up delivering a bunch of babies because no one could get out to Pincher or Cardston. So, it is like a place that can become very inaccessible.
Right.
And I really, for thrillers, that's what you want.
It's a really interesting place. I always used to go there in the summer, very touristy, and you buy the ice cream and stuff. And then one time I went in the winter, and it was the most silent place.
Yeah.
And I work in a rural school. We only have 100 kids in our school, but this Waterton in the winter, in some moments, the silence.
Yeah.
Obviously, when I went there, it was more like beautiful silence. Silence, the serial killer is more like an eerie kind of silence. But
right.
it's like a tourist place. But you could look outside, and there could be a bear there, and yet it's also modern, and it's very unique.
It is. And it's what you said about like bears and stuff. Like, I remember coming home from work, because I used to work every summer out there. And I came and I was just like, it's dark, right? It's like 2 a.m. and I've gotten off work and I'm walking home, and I came through the back, and my dad whipped open the back door and said, like, stop. And I stopped, and then I heard it. And it was like this low growl, and there was a bear between us. I would have walked right into it. Like, it's one of those places that is just still wild in a lot of ways, which is wonderful. And it's very beautiful and pristine. But yeah, there are people there too.
It's incredible. Is the Waterton mystery series, is that like your latest project? Like, I know you mentioned you're working on one, but is that your most recent release, or what's the last book that you released? So my last book from the Big Five that released was Switchback. So that's a Macmillan book, which also takes place in Waterton. And although there's Easter eggs, it is not part of the Waterton series. That's Kids Get Lost in the Mountains. And then I had one that is just a small press release, which was Sip, Sip, Bang, Bang, takes place in New York. And it's basically like Die Hard in a coffee shop. And that one is just like a little fun book. Little bit of, like, it sort of takes place over Christmas. People get caught up in a holdup. It's really fun. And then with the project that you just mentioned before that you were submitting, is it something new? Is it something different? Is it a continuation of a series?
It is totally new. And it's like the next one that will go out on submission, because you always have like projects. I always have like multiple projects on the go. So that one's about to go on submission. I just signed a couple months ago for my next one to be released, which is called Inescapable, a Ghost Story. That is also Stonehouse, which is an Alberta press. That one takes place in Calgary and Banff. It's right about the time there were those big floods and the whole city flooded. And it's about a young woman who is an artist, but she's an art restorer, and she's married to a much, much older, much more famous artist, like kind of like this massively well-known Canadian artist. And he has a heart attack while they're at their cabin in Banff. And she begs him to stay. And she's like, you know, don't go, the ambulance is coming. And he dies, but he stays. And then the rest of the book is like, how do you untether this ghost that is destroying your life? And that one is coming out next spring. And I'm so excited. There's little bits of hints of supernatural in my Waterton series. This one adds the more of this aspect of, is she actually just bereft and she's losing her connection to reality? Or really, is there a ghost that is tormenting her and she can't disconnect from her husband who has passed away? It's so fun. I'm just like really excited that
Yeah, that sounds very intriguing.
Sounds so
Especially,
intriguing.
Yeah, if you're like, is there a ghost?
Yeah.
Isn't there a ghost?
You know what? You know what caught me? I went to Banff when I was a young kid with my family and my aunt and uncle and their boys, and we ended up staying at a cabin in Banff. And they screwed up our reservation, so they shoved us in like this royal suite cabin that like only the royals stay in. But it was like spring break week, so they had nothing. They double booked by accident, so they were like, "We're so sorry, we're gonna shove you into this cabin." And it was massive. Like I had a king size bed and a bathroom to myself, and I was listening to Backstreet Boys at the time, so I don't remember how old I was, but I was young. And we had so many ghost encounters in that cabin. So much happened during that week. It never freaked me out. It was never a bad thing. But the staff kept like giving us gift baskets full of like milk and cheese and bread as apologies. Like we would come home from the ski hill and the front door would be wide open. All the lights would be on. And we're like, are the maids not smart? And they're like, no, it's totally fine. It was fine. And we didn't really find out until afterwards. And so whenever I think of Banff, I think of spirits and supernatural. And I'm 150% a believer that there are spirits around us all the time. Like my kid talks to them for sure. She talks to them. Like you don't stare at a corner and have a conversation under one and happy all the time in the middle of the night, but she does.
Yeah.
So I can't, but that's what got me. And now I'm like, well, damn, I got to read that book and maybe it will take me back to that childhood vacation at Banff. Like it's a magical spiritual place. I bet you.
I'm just excited. I know all these locations and someone
I know, me too.
Setting things that I'm like, I live 2 hours away from Calgary. I remember those floods. I'm just excited. I know these places.
Right.
Yeah. It's funny. I think sometimes we feel kind of compelled, like we have to write maybe for the American audience sometimes. Like I know sometimes there's certain words, like I flag them for myself now. Like you can't say parkade because no one in the States will know what that means. So I just flag it for myself and remove it. It's like a parking garage. Or like you never say grade 7, you would say 7th grade. And I've had to learn those things. But I think also there's value in just having these stories that take place in little Canadian villages and towns and cities. Mm-hmm. Like, why not? There's a lot of people in Alberta, and especially because it is an Alberta press that's publishing it. I kind of love that.
I love it too. And you know what? Canada is a very diverse country and we have people from all around the world. And I absolutely love when I pick up a book or start a TV show or a movie and it's not set in Chicago, Atlanta, New York, some big hub. It's set somewhere else. And that's what actually draws me into stories more often than not, is the location is not the typical location. Because now I'm immersed into something that I might not know, or it might be familiar because it's a small town from, I don't know, the outback in Australia, but somehow it reminds me of the cabin that I grew up in the summertime, or a trip that I took one time. I absolutely love that. And I think it's very important to speak to those places and let the world know that they do exist and they do have entertaining storylines, even though they might come from my head.
And Canadians go on adventures too.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. Like it's not every day we see a bear or a moose, but like it happens. We don't live in igloos either and run around with dog sleds, but like
I
we
did
could
have a
write
sled
stories.
dog though. I had a husky for a
Yeah,
while,
so did I. I grew up with a husky. Yep.
but
I think
no
everybody.
sled.
No sled. No,
No.
not at all. I don't do outdoors. Like I gotta put the layers on and then I'm like, gotta go to the bathroom. And then by the time I go to the bathroom, I'm too tired. Like you get dressed up, you get undressed, and now why you get dressed up again? Just give me a hot cocoa and a good book, and I'll sit by the window like a little house cat and wave to everybody outside.
Well, we are running out of time,
Oh my
unfortunately.
gosh.
So let's say that, everybody that's watched this or is listening to this, they now want to read all these books. They want to grab
Yeah.
Switchback for the Lost in the Mountains adventure. They want to go revisit visit for the first time Waterton.
Yep.
Where can they find you to find out more about these books and what's coming? Where can they find your books? Where can they track you down?
Well, probably the easiest place to just find out everything about them would be to go to danikastone.com. Danika is with a K. And then I'll have links for everything, but you can also find me on Twitter, Danika, I think it's Danika_Stone. And then on Instagram, it's Danika K Stone. You can find me there as well. But yeah, if you just go to danikastone.com, you will find all of those links and all the access to social media. And I am really on social media a lot, but it's funny, I have this very, like specific times of day I'll show up. And if you reach out, I will absolutely reply back to you because I always feel like that's like, I don't know, isn't that why we write, to connect with readers around the world? So I really love that.
That's
Totally.
right. Well, and you're a teacher like me. So, I mean, there's certain hours of the day when you can't just, plunk your students down and be like, yo, I'm going to be on my phone.
Yeah.
So readers are important and we do want to connect with them. But as long as they're just a little bit patient with us.
Yes.
Yeah. Then I love talking to readers. And
Oh, it's the best.
yeah, it's just great to see what they got out of a story. Because it might
Yeah.
not be what I like my favorite
Intended.
moment might not be theirs, and then that's pretty cool to find out, and then helps you with future books. But it's just neat.
It really is.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a fresh perspective. Like I love talking to readers about my books, especially when there's wine involved. It just makes it so much better.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
I like talking to my aunt to see what makes her be like, well, I like this part, but I didn't want that to happen to the character. That really, I was,
Did you kill off a favorite character, Jenna?
Well, probably, but mostly like it's like I didn't want that to happen. She's very sweet. She wants only good things, which is good. But in a book, bad stuff has to happen, unfortunately. Otherwise, it's not much of a book.
That's true.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny when I'm writing, what I usually do, if it's YA, I'll read a chapter a night to my boys and their teens. And if at the end of the chapter, they're like, all right, good night, Mom. Well, I failed. But if they are like, no, you've got to keep going. And I'm like, too bad it's not written. Then I know that what I created clicked. And with Switchback, that was the one, like they were yelling and like, no, you can't leave him stuck on that cliff. And I'm like, go to bed. So it's almost like a hack to have kids that are teens and read to them.
I like that idea. I'm going to have to put that one in the notebook for like 14 years from now.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure and we've learned a lot, and that's always our goal. And hopefully our audience has learned a few things too. Just before we wrap up, we want to say a shout out and a thank you to our show sponsors. So a big thank you to Creative Edge Publicity and the Writers Corner Network. And of course, all our viewers and all our listeners. Thank you very, very much. Bye.
Bye.